Hello and good morning, good evening, and good afternoon for wherever you're joining me. Thank you for your time. And let's dive straight in. So today's daf is Bava Metzia Daf 75 Amud B. Kol Yemei Gorid Echol Kol Yemei Revia Lechas Lo Yom Lo Karos Imi Bagad Rid Echeros Imcha Baravia. All of the days during the summer, when it does not rain, are viewed as one period, meaning that if they each agree to work one day, dry days are viewed as they were exactly equal in length, despite the slight differences between them. Similarly, all the rainy days are treated as one period. So what does that mean? Garid uvia, dry and rainy. According to Rashi, it is harder to work on wet, rainy days due to the condition of the field. Conversely, the Meiri maintained that dry days are difficult because the land is hard and made tilling and ploughing more laborious. But he will not say to him, "Plough with me in the dry season, and I will plough with you in the rainy season." Rabbi Gamliel says there is a case of prepaid interest, and there is a case of interest paid later, both of which are prohibited. How so? If he had hopes of borrowing money from him in the future, and he sends him money or a gift and says, "I am sending this gift in order that you will lend me," this is prepaid interest. Similarly, if he borrowed money from him and subsequently returned his money, and he later sends a gift to him and says, "I am sending you this gift in order to repay you for your money, which is idle with me, preventing you from earning a profit," this is interest paid later. So what does that mean? Ribis mukdemes uribis mucheres. In the case of one who seeks to borrow money from another and sends him a gift to persuade him to provide the loan, this is prohibited as prepaid interest. If he borrowed money, repaid him, and then gave him as a gift, is prohibited, is paid later. In a moral right, if a borrower does not state that the gift was given due to the loan, giving the gift is not prohibited, unless it was a large gift that was clearly given because of the loan. And it is clear that if he said to himself, it is as clear as if he had said it himself. The Shach maintains there's no dispute between the authorities concerning this, as it all depends on the particular circumstance. As the Rambam says, Mishpat Hilchot Ma'av Vadoma 5:11-13, Shulchan Aruch Yodei 166. Bava Gamliel says there is a case of prepaid interest, and there is also a case of interest paid later, both of which are prohibited. How so? Sorry, I said that. Rabbi Shimon says not only is there interest consisting of payment of money or items, there's also verbal interest. So what's that? If it's borrowing verbal interest, the lender may not say to the borrower, "Inform me of so and so arrives from such and such a place." Any verbal interest is kind of prohibited. The Rambam says, "Mishpat Hilchot Ma'av Vadoma 5:13, Shulchan Aruch Yodei 160:12, and Kom Numar." Example: the borrower may not say to the lender, "You should know that so and so has come from such and such a place," when he is aware that this information is of significance to his creditor. Since his intention is to provide a benefit to the lender, he has effectively paid him an extra sum for the money he lent him, which constitutes interest, and the people will violate the prohibition of interest. Over and below Tasa. One must be careful with regard to interest, as by Torah there are some prohibitions concerning it. Not only the lender, but the borrower, the guarantor, and it is all violate the prohibition of interest. Same applies to the scribe, to the Shach cited in the Rambam, as well as anyone which if there's a middleman in the transaction. The Ramah cited in the Rambam and the Nemuki Yosef states that this all applies only to interest by Torah law. Because only interest prohibited by rabbinic law, they transgress only one command, which should not place a stumbling block before the blind. And that's the Rambam statement, Mishpat Hilchot Ma'av Vadoma 4:2, Shulchan Aruch Yodei 161. And then the comment of the Ramah of interest, the lender, the borrower, and the guarantor, and the witnesses. And the rabbis say also the scribe provides a promise note violates prohibition. When parties to the transaction violate different prohibitions. Vishimas halovim. This list does not follow the order of the verses in the Torah. Instead, the Tana starts with the prohibitions that apply only to the lender before moving on to those that apply to the other accomplices to the transgression as well as some are in violation of you shall not give him your money with interest, Leviticus 25:37, and of you shall not take interest from him or increase, Leviticus 25:36, and of you shall not be to him as a creditor in Exodus 22:24. There's a footnote there on that one. Lo tiyeh lo kenoshe. Although this prohibition applies to all loans, not only those that involve interest, if the loan was not given with interest, the lender appears to be less of a creditor, since he does not increase his income with the passage of time. In the case of a loan with interest, by contrast, the presence of the creditor always weighs upon the borrower, and of do not place interest upon him in Exodus 22:24, and of you shall not place a stumbling block before the blind, and you shall fear your God, I am the Lord, in Leviticus 19:14. Lifnei iver lo titain michsha v'yaresa Although it would have been enough to cite the phrase, and you should not place a stumbling block before the blind, and I quoted the verse in its entirety in order to conclude the Mishnayot of the chapter on apportionment to Tiferet Yisrael. Gemara, Tanya Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai Omer. From where is it derived with regard to one who is owed 100 dinars by another, and the borrower is not accustomed to greet that lender, that it is prohibited to start greeting him? If the borrower is not accustomed to greeting the lender, he may not start to do so after the lender granted him a loan, as stated in the Bible, 5:12, Shulchan Yodei 160:11. And we learned that after being granted a loan, the verse states, interest of any matter devoured that is lent with interest, Deuteronomy in 22:20, which can also be read as indicating that even speech, dibur, can be prohibited as interest. The Mishnah teaches, and these people violate the prohibition of interest. Abai says the lender violates all of them, meaning all of the prohibitions listed in the Mishnah. The borrower violates the prohibition of you shall not lend to your brother with interest, Deuteronomy 23:20, as he enables his brother to lend with interest. They also violate the prohibition you may lend to a Gentile with interest, but to your brother you shall not lend with interest, Deuteronomy 23:21, as well as you shall not place a stumbling block before the blind, Leviticus 19:14. The guarantor and the witness violate only do not place interest upon him in Exodus 22:24. It is told in a Braita. And Rabbi Shimon says, those who lend with interest lose more than they gain, and they will eventually be punished by God. Moreover, a loan of this kind desecrates the name of heaven, as they cause it to seem that Moses, our teacher, is a scholar and his Torah is true. This is euphemism. It refers to a claim that is made more typically by lenders that lend with interest than other transgressions. They do not deny lending with interest, but explain that taking interest is merely an investment that provides profit, while imagining that Moses was unaware of this fact when transmitting God's Torah. The Rashash similarly explains that the statement there was profit involved in the matter. It also refers to the borrower who is able to make use of the money. By contrast, some commentators read the statement in a straightforward manner that those who lend with interest will ultimately be punished with loss of their possessions, at which point they will admit that Moses is a scholar and his Torah is true. That's the Anaf Yosef. This is a euphemism. Rabbi Shimon means that their actions make a mockery of Moses and his Torah. And this is because they say, had Moses and Torah known that there was a profit involved in this matter, it would not have written as a prohibition. Not only did they violate a mitzvah, but they also belittled the Torah. The Gemara cites further statements with regard to loans in general. When Rav Dimi came from Eretz Yisrael, he said, "From where is it derived that with regard to one who is owed 100 dinars by another, and knows that the borrower does not have the funds to repay him, that it is prohibited for him to pass before the borrower? The question may not present himself before one who owes him money if he knows that this does not have the funds to repay the loan. This is in order to avoid scaring or shaming him. The obligation applies even if he does not request repayment of the debt, and all the more so it applies if he does demand his money. 83 Shulchan Aruch 97:2. So not to embarrass the borrower and cause him discomfort. The verse states, do not be with him as a creditor, Exodus 22:24, even if he does not claim from the borrower. His presence reminds the latter of the debt, which distressed him. Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Asi both say that if one upsets another in this way, it's as though he sentences him to two types of punishments. As it is stated, you are caused men to ride over our heads. We went through fire and through water in Psalm 66:12. As in the one in control, a creditor is regarded as though he had brought the debtor through fire and water. Rabbi Yehuda says that Rav says, whoever has money and lends and is not in the presence of witnesses violates prohibition of it. You should not place a stumbling block before the blind, Leviticus 19:14, as is tempted by not to repay his debt. And Reish Lakish says, he will bring a curse upon him, as is stated, let the lying lips be dumb, which speak arrogantly against the righteous with pride and contempt in Psalms 31:19. Whereas when the lender comes to claim money without any proof, people will think that he is falsely accusing the borrower, and they will end up cursing him. Permitted to lend money, even to a Torah scholar, without the presence of witnesses. One may do so if he takes collateral, but it is better to lend with a promissory note. Whoever acts in this manner and versus the prohibition, you not place a stumbling block before the blind and bring the curse upon himself. It is stated in our Chashulchan that nowadays we are not careful about this matter, as we trust the borrower not to forget. I'm saying Mishpat Mechilchamav Valova 2:7, Choshen Mishpat 71. And the more related incident. The sages said to Rav Ashi, Ravina fulfills all the directives that the sages say. Seek to test him. Rav Ashi sent a messenger to him close to sunset on Eve of Shabbat. Bahade Fanya de Ma'ale Shabsa. Rav Ashi purposely chose a very busy time to examine whether he would still be able to obey the directive of the sages even under such constraints as the Yavitz. At the busiest time of the week, the following question: let the master send me 10 dinars as a loan, and that have happened upon a small piece of land for an acquisition, and I need the money. And we didn't send a message to him, let the master bring witnesses, and we will write a document for this loan. Rav Ashi sent a message to him, even I as well, respect me of shirking payment, and said to him, all the more so is necessary to document a loan to the master, who is occupied with his studies and will therefore very likely to forget, and I will thereby bring a curse upon myself. The sages taught in a brighter, there are three who cry out and are not answered. Soakin ve'ein na'anin. According to Rashi, this refers to a cry before a court of men, explaining that even the heavenly court does not heed their cries, and they have no one to blame for their plight but themselves. Rabbi Baruch HaSephardi Shiti Mechubeses. And they are responsible for their own troubles, and they are one who has money and lends it, not in the presence of witnesses, and one who acquires a master for himself, and one whose wife rules over him. Rabbeinu Hanana and others explain this referred to one who received a fortune from his wife's family when he married her, which is why she rules over him. This case is therefore similar to the other example cited in the Braita. Ramel clarifies, one who acquires a master himself, what is it? There are those who say that it is referring to one who attributes his property to a Gentile. The Ritva explains that he hides his property from the authorities by temporarily giving it to a Gentile and later complains when the Gentile refuses to give it back. Falsely claims that his possessions belong to the Gentile in order to evade his obligations, thereby inviting the Gentile to take advantage of this declaration. And there are those who say that this is referring to one who writes a document bequeathing his property as a gift to his children in his lifetime, as he becomes financially dependent on them. And there are those who say that he's referring to the one who has bad fortune in this town, but does not go to a different town. He is constantly responsible for his own misfortunes. The Maharsha explains that this does not refer to one who acquires a master himself, but is another example of those who cry out without being answered. In Ramat Shmuel, it is explained that one who suffered misfortune in his hometown must presumably humble himself before others upon whom he is dependent, which is equivalent to having a master. Now I'll give a summary of chapter 5. In this chapter, several principles with regard to the nature of interest were defined. The most basic definition is that any additional payment in return for delaying repayment of the loan is prohibited as a form of interest, no matter how this interest is paid, whether with money or other forms of benefits that have monetary value, or even in some form of various types of benefits that have no monetary value, such as greeting someone or engaging in other forms of verbal interest. Guidelines were also established to distinguish between legitimate partnerships and business ventures, from which one is entitled to enjoy a profit, and forbidden loans with interest, whether these are conducted directly, indirectly, or through use of artifice. With regard to joint business ventures, the halacha is that the investor must accept upon himself a high percentage of risk and profit he receives, either by increasing his responsibility for possible losses or decreasing the share of profit he receives from the venture. The principle is that the transaction is permitted if, from the lender's perspective, it is close to loss and far from profit. With regard to other forms of transactions, one must distinguish between an actual sale, whether it is permitted for the seller to give various documents to the buyer in consideration of any payment, and a fictitious sale, in which it is prohibited to provide a discount because of a hint of interest. The question of uncertain interest was also resolved, with the strict opinion being accepted. Even if it is uncertain whether interest will be paid by the borrower to the lender, nevertheless, if the lender benefits from the borrower's property as a result of the loan, it is prohibited as interest. Another fundamental discussion concerns whether a court can compel a lender to return interest that he collected from a borrower. The fundamental question is that whether the prohibition of interest should be viewed as a sin between man and God, and therefore the punishment will be delivered in the hand of heaven, or whether interest is viewed as money gained legitimately, even if the borrower agreed, and therefore can be removed by means of legal proceedings adjudicated by judges. The conclusion is that fixed interest, which is forbidden by Torah law, can be removed by means of legal proceedings adjudicated by judges. Interest forbidden by rabbinic law cannot be removed. The prohibition of interest applies to transactions between Jews, but not to transactions involving a Gentile, whether he is a borrower or lender. The sages rendered prohibited complex transactions where a Gentile is brought in for the purpose of granting legitimacy to what is actually a loan with interest between two Jews. The sages also added words of rebuke for anyone who partakes or aids in the violation of Torah law and thereby leads to a desecration of God's name. Now we move into the introduction to chapter 6, Perek 6. When one hires another to perform any sort of work, there are two halachic aspects to the relationship. The first includes the Torah and rabbinic laws dealing with employers and employees in general. For the most part, these halachot are discussed in the 7th chapter of the tractate. The second relates to the specific nature of the agreements between the parties, or where those agreements are tacitly accepted in accordance with local custom. In standard hiring practice, especially for short-term assignments, the parties do not typically draft detailed contracts stipulating the various problems that might arise in the course of their work. This chapter focuses on several basic questions concerning average labor agreements, for which conditions or penalties for diverging from or reneging on the agreement have not been clearly defined at the outset. Three fundamental problems are addressed. First, how binding is a standard work agreement, and what is halacha when one party reneges? Second, when one rents an animal to ride on to perform work, what standard requirements apply to each party, and under what conditions is either party entitled to monetary compensation for damage caused by the violation of the agreement by the other side? Finally, what level of liability applies to artisans or skilled laborers for damage caused to goods with which they are working, whether during the period when they are working with them or afterward, whether they fulfill the terms of the work agreement or violate them. Three concepts from the Torah guide this chapter's evaluation of these questions are halachot of exploitation, both monetary and verbal, tort and personal injury law concerning damage caused both directly by one's person or indirectly through commission or omission, and lastly the halachot of liability of paid baileys, unpaid baileys, borrowers and renters. Throughout the chapter, the sages assess to what extent these legal categories apply to labor agreements. Practical questions and to some extent conceptual analyses of these issues are the focus of this chapter, although in typical Talmudic style, other matters are explored along the way. Let's dive straight in. With regard to one who hires artisans, what does that mean? Hashoche es ha'umonin. The early commentators explain that where the term labours refers to those hired for a fixed period of time, artisans is a general term that includes labourers as well as contractors, or hired to perform a specific task. That's from the Tosfot. They note, and this is not invariably the case, as the term labourers can occasionally include contractors as well. Nevertheless, the term artisan apparently has a broader content. See the Marashad and Nefesh Chaya. Or labourers as they deceived one another. The commentators claim that this applies only if theirs was merely a verbal agreement, whereas if they performed an act of acquisition to demonstrate their full commitment to the arrangement or have begun the work, they derive it, the labour is obligated to complete it, the ritva. they have nothing but a grievance against another, no. If anyone having children neighbours and they deceive one another, if one of them wishes to retract, he may do so, and the other has only a grievance against him. In 33:1. And they have no financial claim against the deceptive party. If one hired a donkey driver or potter to bring posts, farin, from the Greek beverage of sitting chairs, for canapé or flutes, in the Mishnaic period in Aristotle, it was customary to play flutes or similar instruments at a funeral. Custom was considered so important that it was even permitted to transport the instruments for this purpose in a halachically problematic manner. In later generations, this practice was abandoned as it became regarded as a Gentile custom. And there's a greeting here in the Koran. It's a Greek drawing from a 5th century BC of a woman playing the ulos. To play in honor of a bride or the dead, or if you hire labourers to bring up his flax from the retting tub. What's that? Pishtasher min ha-mishmor. Linen is produced from flax as they are harvested from the field. Flax plants are soaked for a period of time in a tub or pool of water, a process called retting. This allows the plants to rot and release bacteria that dissolve the agent, binding together the cellulose fibers. Once the outer layer of the stalk rots, it is separated from the cellulose fibers by a process called scooching, while passing the cellulose flax plants between two rollers. If the flax plants are left to rot for too long, the fibers that otherwise would have been spun to linen are likely to rot as well. A container of water in which flax is placed is the first stage of manufacture of linen, and likewise any matter that involves financial loss is included with work that will entail a monetary loss, as well as items that cannot be fixed if they are not treated in time, even if this will not cost the employer money. With regard to one who hires artisans or labourers for a fixed period of time and they renege, if he hired them to perform a task that involves financial loss, if it is not performed on time and he is unable to find replacement labourers, he may hire others for a high price at their expense or deceive them by promising them extra pay. 233.5. If not performed on time and the labour is reneged, if this occurs in a place where there is no other person, the time does not refer to a time when there is no other person, as a key factor is whether or not the labour is available at that time. If there are other labourers available in a place but the employer cannot find any at a given time, the labourers who change their mind can claim, and they assume that he would be able to replace him and did not think he would suffer a loss when they owe him to perform the task. He may hire replacements for a large fee at the expense of the first workers or deceive them to get them to return to work. The commentary states that if the employer neglected to hire replacements or deceived the labourers and he suffered a loss, the labourers are not obligated to compensate him despite the fact that they were at fault, or they do not have the status of either bailies or contractors. Others disagree, that if they are responsible for his loss, they must pay, and according to the halacha of one who causes damage indirectly, Ashrei. The Mishnah states a related halacha. With regard to one who hires artisans or labourers to perform work, and they renege on the agreement midway through the work, they are at a disadvantage. They must ensure that the employer does not suffer a loss. That's the end of the Omid. I wish you a very good day and peace in Israel. All the best. Bye.